What if the greatest secret of life on Earth is hidden not in the stars above us, but in a thin sliver of deep time? A silence, a gap, a vanishing act between two ages. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. The Ediacaran world, 630 million years ago, filled with strange, soft-bodied creatures drifting like living tapestries across the seafloor. Then, almost suddenly, geologically speaking, comes the Cambrian, about 51 million years ago, and everything changes. Shells appear, teeth, claws, eyes glittering in the water, like tiny lanterns. Predators, prey, a planetary drama begins, fierce and wild. But here's the puzzle. Between the gentle Ediacaran dreamscape and the explosive Cambrian carnival, there's a mysterious blank space, an evolutionary jump so abrupt, it feels less like a smooth chapter in Earth's book, and more like someone skipped a few pages. Where did the soft, quilt-like organisms go? Why did armored hunters and hard shells suddenly arrive as if someone or something flipped a cosmic switch? Some scientists call it the Cambrian Explosion. Others whisper about missing data, eroded fossils, or chemistry that doesn't fossilize well. But in late-night corners of the imagination, stranger ideas take root. Could there have been intervention? Perhaps cosmic visitors tinkering with DNA, a universal experiment running in secret, or even knowledge deliberately erased? Was this leap written into Earth's script all along, or did someone edit the play mid-performance? Imagine yourself floating in those ancient oceans, waters shimmering with starlight, seabeds alive with delicate impressions. Then, without warning, new creatures bursting into existence, armored and hungry. Was it evolution's natural pace, or something else entirely? That's the mystery we'll sink into tonight. A gap in the fossil record, a blank page in life's diary, a puzzle still unsettled. And before we dive deeper into what the Ediacaran truly was, or what the Cambrian became, I'd love to hear your thought. Do you think this leap was a natural unfolding, or could it hint at something more? Tap like, subscribe if you haven't, and share your wildest theory in the comments. After all, the oceans of deep time may hold secrets stranger than any conspiracy we invent. The Earth has a way of whispering secrets in fragments, in half-told stories carved into stone, in fossils that appear like ancient photographs, but always missing the captions. And among the strangest of these whispers lies a gap so puzzling that it feels like a deliberate pause, a hidden chapter between two very different worlds of life. One moment in the Ediacaran, creatures seem soft, dreamlike, without claws or teeth, drifting across the seafloor as if evolution itself were in no hurry. Then, in the blink of a geological eye, the Cambrian arrives, bursting with hard shells, glaring eyes, swift predators, and the first truly dangerous dramas of the animal kingdom. Between them lies a silence, a gap in the record, a missing bridge with no footprints across it. Imagine it like this. You open a family photo album. On one page, you see gentle portraits of distant ancestors, strange, peaceful figures, wrapped in flowing robes, their shapes blurred at the edges. On the very next page, without warning, the family has transformed into armored knights, sword in hand, eyes wide, ready for battle. And you look between the pages, searching desperately for the gradual transition, the children who might link the peaceful dreamers to the warriors. But there are none, just a blank space where the photographs should be. That is what scientists face when they study the evolutionary gap between the Ediacaran and the Cambrian. Fossils are our memory of life, etched not in ink but in stone. And yet, memory is fickle. The rocks tell us much, but they do not tell us everything. In this case, they show us two scenes of Earth's great play, but the connecting acts are missing. There is no gradual blending, no clear line of descent. The soft-bodied forms of the Ediacaran vanish, and in their place emerge creatures with armor, mobility, vision, an entirely new strategy for survival. It is not just an evolutionary step. It feels like an evolutionary leap, as if nature skipped rehearsal and leapt straight into performance. And here, late at night, when speculation runs wilder than reason, questions begin to glow like phosphorescent plankton in the ocean of thought. Was this leap a natural burst of creativity from the planet itself? Or lean in closer, could something have intervened? Could the missing fossils, the absent transitions, be more than bad luck or the cruelty of erosion? Could they have been erased? This is where conspiracy takes a seat at the table, grinning knowingly. Some whisper that perhaps an advanced intelligence, alien visitors, cosmic gardeners, or some ancient hidden civilization swept through Earth's oceans, wiped the slate clean and began a new experiment. It sounds outrageous. Yes, but so does the gap itself. Why do we not see the slow progression we expect? Why is the bridge missing? If life is a continuous story, who tore out these pages? The thought is mischievous, almost playful. What if Earth was edited? What if the Ediacaran world was Chapter 1, carefully erased or retired, and the Cambrian was Chapter 2, launched with brand new characters, brand new strategies, as though some cosmic writer grew bored and demanded a twist in the plot? The soft, gentle beings of the Ediacaran could not compete in the theatre of survival, so perhaps they were retired deliberately, their traces erased not by time but by choice. Scientists, of course, offer many grounded explanations. They talk of preservation biases, of the difficulty in fossilizing soft creatures, of chemistry that does not favor delicate forms. But conspiracy has a way of curling into the corners science leaves open, and the Cambrian gap is a corner so dark, so oddly vacant, that whispers echo easily within it. Imagine, for a moment, the ocean floor as a stage. The Ediacaran actors bow out quietly, leaving behind faint impressions in the mud, their soft outlines fossilized only by chance. The curtains close. When they rise again, the Cambrian bursts forth like an entirely new production. Bright costumes, flashing lights, a dazzling spectacle of eyes, shells, teeth, speed and predation. And you, sitting in the audience of time, blink in confusion. Where did the rehearsal go? Where are the in-between characters, who should have slowly grown tougher skin, sharper senses, better defenses? They are absent, as if someone cut the reel and spliced in a new sequence. And here comes the sly suggestion. Maybe someone really did. Perhaps Earth was not merely evolving, but being curated. The idea that the fossil record itself could have been cleaned up feels absurd, and yet it tickles the imagination. If an alien civilization were experimenting with life, would they not tidy their laboratory, sweeping away the earlier prototypes to make way for new models? The Ediacaran, then, could be seen as a trial run, a soft opening of biology, the Cambrian, the grand unveiling of a more competitive, more dramatic form of life. And the gap, the silence, is the clean slate between experiment. Of course, such musings belong more to science fiction than to science, but so often the border between them blurs, especially in the small hours of the night, when the mind enjoys its freedom to wander. What is more unsettling, the thought that an alien hand sculpted the leap, or the thought that nature itself can rewrite her rules with such startling abruptness. The rocks themselves seem to tease us. They preserve exquisite details of both Ediacaran and Cambrian worlds, yet they yield almost nothing from the narrow corridor between. It is as if a black hole of time swallowed the transitional evidence. The Ediacaran leaves behind imprints like gentle signatures on soft charchan. The Cambrian, by contrast, announces itself loudly, with mineralized parts that fossilize easily, shouting their presence across 500 million years. And in between, silence. The record does not fade, it drops off a cliff. No wonder, then, that imagination rushes to fill the void. Some envision extraterrestrial gardeners pruning Earth's biosphere, wiping away one style of life and planting another. Others imagine hidden archives, layers of fossils buried so deep or so well concealed that they may never be found, as if the planet itself has secrets it refuses to share. Perhaps the Earth is not just a stage, but also a trickster, hiding its oldest rehearsals behind locked doors. The humor, if you can call it that, is how coy the planet seems. It offers us hints, impressions, whispers, but never the whole truth. The Ediacaran says, "Here we were, soft, strange, gentle." The Cambrian says, "And here we are, armored, fierce, with eyes that can see and jaws that can bite." But the middle pages are missing, and when we ask the Earth for answers, it only shrugs, as if to say, "My secrets are deep, and not all of them are for you." And so we circle the mystery. Could it be preservation bias? Could it be chance? Could it be alien interference? Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that we will never know, that the missing fossils are truly missing, not just misplaced but erased by the chemistry of deep time, that the gap is permanent, a wound in the story of life that cannot be stitched. But conspiracy thrives in uncertainty, and this gap is fertile ground. The absence of transitional fossils feels too neat, too sharp, too much like deliberate editing. Nature usually leaves mess, a trail of half-formed experiments, transitional states, clumsy in-betweens. Here the absence feels surgical, as if a careful hand swept the slate. If it was not nature, then whose? Was Earth's laboratory visited by cosmic supervisors? Was this leap written in some galactic script, hidden from us until we grew curious enough to notice? It is tempting to laugh at such thoughts, to brush them off as fanciful, but laughter does not erase the gap. It remains, lodged in the fossil record like a riddle carved in stone. The Ediacaran and the Cambrian stand like two cliffs facing each other, across a chasm, and we, tiny explorers, peer into the void between, trying to bridge it with imagination. The bridge itself is gone, or perhaps never existed. Think again of the ocean, shimmering in starlight 500 million years ago. Creatures drift softly, unhurried, their bodies delicate as lace. Then, as if dawn breaks, the ocean fills with motion, churning, hunting, hiding, fighting. The difference is so stark that the absence of intermediates feels more like an erasure than an oversight. Something happened. We see the before, we see the after, but the middle, the becoming, is missing. And so the question lingers, delicious and unsettling. Who erased the pages? Time, chemistry, or a hand not of this world? The conspiracy-minded smile, knowingly, whispering that Earth's fossil record is not just incomplete, but edited, that the Cambrian explosion was less an accident of evolution and more a reboot, a restart, a deliberate unveiling. Perhaps we will never know, but perhaps that is the point. The Earth thrives on mystery. It gives us just enough evidence to marvel, but never enough to solve the puzzle completely. The gap between Ediacaran and Cambrian is not just a scientific problem. It is an invitation to wonder, to imagine the impossible, to suspect the unseen, and maybe, just maybe, to admit that some of Earth's deepest secrets are hidden on purpose. So we linger at the edge of the chasm, gazing across from soft-bodied dreamers to armored predators, from silence to spectacle, from peace to struggle. The fossils do not guide us across. The bridge is gone, and in the void we hear only the Earth's quiet laughter, whispering, "My secrets are older than you, and some of them are mine alone." Close your eyes and drift backward in time, not thousands of years, not even millions, but hundreds of millions, to an Earth that would feel like a dreamscape compared to the one you know. It is the Ediacaran, a world before teeth, before eyes, before armor. The oceans are the planet's stage, but the cast is unlike anything familiar. No snapping jaws, no piercing stares, no shells clinking against one another. Instead, the seafloor is a quiet garden of softness, populated by organisms so strange, so utterly unlike later life, that even today scientists squint at their fossils and shrug. What we know is simple and baffling at once. The Ediacaran world was alive, but alive in ways that defy easy categories. Picture the creatures of this age as delicate forms pressed into the canvas of the ocean floor, like nature doodling in soft clay. Some resembled discs, some fronds, some quilted patches like living tapestries stretched across the sediment. They had no shells, no eyes, no mouths, as we know them, and apparently no interest in predation. They seemed to drift, to rest, to absorb life rather than chase it. A passive kingdom, quiet, almost dreamlike. And yet, these were the first truly large, multicellular organisms to spread across Earth's oceans. After billions of years of microbial dominance, this was the planet's first real attempt at scale, at bodies bigger than the microscopic. Imagine standing on that ancient seafloor. Though you would not stand at all, you would float, because gravity feels different when life itself is still tentative. Around you, these organisms spread like living rugs, soft and patterned, some rising gently like leafy fronds, others lying flat like enormous coins. They had no clear predators to disturb them, no hunters forcing them into arms races of speed or defense. For perhaps the first time in history, Earth's oceans belonged to the gentle. This softness is what makes the Ediacaran so fascinating and so mysterious. Fossils from this age look like imprints of lace, or the outlines of leaves pressed into rock. They reveal bodies without skeletons, creatures without claws, and most puzzling of all, when we try to fit them into the evolutionary tree, the branches twist and tangle. Many Ediacaran organisms seem to have no clear descendants, as though they were a family of life that appeared, thrived, and then disappeared without leaving heirs. To a scientist, this is bewildering. To a dreamer, or to a conspiracy theorist, it is tantalizing. What if the Ediacaran was a prototype? A cosmic test run, a version 1 of multicellular life, launched not by chance but by design? Look at the shapes, discs, fronds, quilted geometries. They seem experimental, as though someone were trying out different blueprints for what large life could look like. Not predatory yet, not armed with shells, but exploratory, playful, perhaps even disposable. Could these soft forms have been seeded deliberately, a biological trial imported from somewhere far beyond Earth? The thought is strange, even comical, like picturing extraterrestrials dropping off batches of living templates into Earth's oceans, watching them drift, waiting to see what worked. Of course, the scientific explanation is gentler. These organisms emerged from the slow collaboration of cells, from the quiet invention of multicellularity after ages of microbial patience. But the imagination cannot help itself. There is something too odd about these creatures, too unlike what came later, too unwilling to leave descendants. Their very strangeness invites conspiracy. Were they erased, or were they never meant to persist at all, only to serve as stepping stones for something yet to come? Think of the Ediacaran world as a cosmic laboratory. The ocean floor becomes a petri dish, scattered with forms that appear almost abstract. They are not fish, not plants, not animals as we know them. They are shapes, patterns, geometry that has learned how to be alive. Some spread across the sand like giant fern leaves, others rose into the currents like soft sails. They had no skeletons to rattle, no teeth to gnash, no eyes to glare. They were quiet experiments, prototypes wandering through the early blueprints of life. And the Earth itself seemed complicit in this softness. The environment was calm compared to earlier cataclysms. Oxygen had begun to seep into the oceans, enough to support larger forms, but not yet enough to fuel ferocious predators. It was a tranquil chemistry, a gentle balance, and into this balance, the Ediacaran beings unfurled themselves. They were fragile, yes, but the world allowed fragility for a time. Imagine seas without terror, without ambush. A garden of living quilts where life was not yet war but simply presence. Yet even in their softness, the Ediacaran organisms challenge us. Were they animals? At all? Plants? Something else entirely? Some show evidence of movement, but sluggish, as if drifting more than crawling. Others appear to have absorbed nutrients directly from the water or the sediment. No mouths or stomachs required. In modern terms, they do not fit. They are the puzzle pieces from a different box, scattered onto the table of Earth's history. And because they do not fit neatly, speculation grows. Perhaps they were never meant to belong to the lineage we know. Perhaps they were visitors, or gifts, or seeds planted by hands unseen. Humor creeps in too. It is almost as if the universe staged a soft rehearsal. Let's try a world without predators. Let's try creatures shaped like leaves and coins. Let's see how they handle oxygen, how they colonize space, how they imprint themselves on sediment. If it worked, wonderful. If not, well, erase the blackboard and try again. The Ediacaran in this view becomes less a final performance and more a dress rehearsal for life on a grander scale. A cosmic experiment running quietly on the ocean floor while the stars looked on. But do not be fooled by the gentle imagery. To live in the Ediacaran was still to exist in a vast, unpredictable planet. Volcanic eruptions, shifting continents, deep oceans rising and falling, these forces framed the stage. The organisms themselves, however, remained humble, passive. They did not dominate through speed or strength. They covered ground softly, expanded their quilt-like mats, occupied space like quiet tenants. Their survival strategy was simplicity itself. Be there, spread wide, and endure. And yet, they endured only so far. Today, when paleontologists trace the record forward, they find the lineages dissolve. Few, if any, of these soft-bodied dreamers seem to carry on into what follows. Their time was real, their presence undeniable, but their legacy a whisper, a rumor, a set of fossils pressed faintly into stone. It is almost as though the Earth herself said, "This was a beginning, but not the story you think." That, of course, is where conspiracy sneaks back in. If these organisms were prototypes, was their disappearance planned? Did some intelligence, terrestrial or otherwise, wipe them away once the experiment was complete? Were they archived in some hidden vault of evolution, filed under version 1 before the next iteration was unleashed? Imagine cosmic engineers leaning over the planet, making notes, disks fragile, fronds interesting but too passive, quilts aesthetically pleasing but ineffective. Try again with better materials. The absurdity is irresistible, and yet when you stare at the fossils themselves, enigmatic, unrooted without clear descendants, the thought does not feel entirely dismissible. Even the Earth seems to play along with the secrecy. Fossils from this time are rare and fragile, preserved more by chance than by design. The record is a patchwork of impressions, outlines, ghostly shapes that leave us more puzzled than informed. It is as if the planet itself were guarding the mystery, offering only glimpses of what truly lived in those oceans. Enough to spark curiosity, but not enough to settle it. Enough to say, yes, this happened, but no, you will not fully understand. So we are left with this picture, a soft, strange world filled with gentle multicellular beings that seem to float between categories. Not predators, not prey, not builders, not hunters, just presence, just softness, and in that softness lies the enigma. Why begin with these forms only to let them vanish? Why invest millions of years in delicate discs and fronds, only for them to leave almost no heirs? Unless, of course, that was the plan all along. Unless the Ediacaran was not failure, but rehearsal, not the destination, but the trial. It is tempting to see in their strangeness the fingerprints of something larger, to wonder if the Ediacaran was less an accident of evolution and more a cosmic sketch drawn quickly, softly, before the canvas was repainted. A version 1 destined to be erased, but never entirely forgotten. Their fossils remain, faint and enigmatic, as if whispering, "We were here first, we were the beginning, even if we were not the end." And so the Ediacaran continues to haunt us. A world of softness, of strange experiments, of organisms that seem to belong more to dreams than to biology. Scientists study their patterns, artists imagine their forms, and conspiracy theorists smile knowingly, suggesting that perhaps we are looking at the first chapter of a script not written by Earth alone, a chapter that feels less like a final story and more like a cosmic prototype, left behind for us to puzzle over in the quiet hours of the night. The Earth, for her part, keeps her secrets. She shows us just enough to wonder, just enough to speculate, just enough to imagine cosmic laboratories and extraterrestrial gardeners. But she never gives away the full truth. The Ediacaran remains her whispered prelude, her soft rehearsal, her dream before the dawn. And maybe that is the point. Maybe life's first great expansion was never meant to make perfect sense. Maybe it was meant to bewilder us, to remind us that the story of life is not a tidy line but a series of experiments, some forgotten, some erased, some left behind as ghostly imprints in ancient stone. A reminder that even our own world began with strangeness, with softness, with beings that do not fit any category we know. So when you picture the Ediacaran, do not imagine predators or hunters. Imagine a quiet seafloor, shimmering with forms like living quilts, discs and fronds, swaying gently in currents. Imagine a world where life had only just learned how to be big, how to stretch beyond the microscopic, how to exist in visible scale. And then imagine, just for fun, that somewhere out there, someone was watching, smiling, taking notes, preparing for whatever came next. If you were to step into the oceans of the Cambrian, You might think you had stumbled into a surprise party thrown by the universe itself. The lights have suddenly come on, the music is blaring, and every guest seems dressed in armor. After ages of quiet, the scene is now buzzing, shimmering, clattering with movement. Shells glint, eyes shine, appendages graft, creatures dart and strike, and chase one another in a way no world had ever seen before. It is life's first arms race, and it begins without warning, without hesitation, with a suddenness so dazzling, it still confuses the minds of scientists today. Here, life has decided that softness is no longer enough. The Cambrian marks the arrival of armor, of exoskeletons, of hard, protective shells. Imagine the ocean as a medieval battlefield, except no humans are present, only newly minted creatures clad in mineralized suits. Their bodies are reinforced, their strategies sharpened, their defenses multiplied. To survive now is no longer just to be present, it is to fight, to flee, to defend, to outsmart. The entire planet seems to have shifted gears, accelerating life into a new mode of being. But armor is only half the story. The Cambrian is also the dawn of sight. For the first time, eyes appear glittering orbs capable of detecting light, shadow, and eventually detail. The ocean, once a place of blind drifting, becomes a theater of vision. With eyes comes awareness. With awareness comes strategy, and with strategy comes predation. Now creatures not only exist, they hunt, they stalk, they ambush, they strike. The Cambrian seas ripple with the tension of hunter and hunted, a drama repeated in endless variations across every reef and plain. And the limbs, oh, the limbs, appendages sprout in 1,000 forms, legs, paddles, spines, antennae. The ocean floor transforms into a parade of creatures marching, swimming, burrowing, scuttling. No longer content to sit still, life begins to move with intent, to explore with purpose, to manipulate its surroundings. Where once the sea was a gallery of drifting forms, it now becomes a carnival of locomotion. The Cambrian is life in motion, life in competition, life in full bloom of diversity. What makes it so extraordinary is not just the appearance of new traits, but the speed with which they proliferate. In a geological blink, the seas go from quiet to crowded, from passive to predatory. The fossil record explodes with variety. Armored bodies, jointed limbs, complex eyes, intricate mouthparts. It is not a slow ramp, but a sudden surge, a fireworks display of biological innovation. And in that suddenness lies the great mystery: why here, why now, and why all at once? Of course, the cautious answer is simply that conditions aligned, that life had been building toward complexity and suddenly found the right ingredients. But the imagination resists caution. It whispers other stories, stranger stories, the kinds told when the lights are low and curiosity outweighs restraint. What if the Cambrian explosion was not just an accident of evolution, but an upgrade, a cosmic update patch, downloaded into Earth's oceans by hands unseen? The creatures certainly behave as if someone flipped a switch or pressed install on a universal program designed to push life into its next stage. Picture it: alien engineers, or perhaps cosmic caretakers peering into Earth's shallow seas, deciding the time for softness was over. With a few adjustments, a nudge to the code, suddenly the oceans brim with predators, prey, eyes, shells, and limbs. A world that once moved at a sleepy pace jolts awake, like a computer rebooting into a far more advanced operating system. The Cambrian becomes version 2.0 of life, a system upgrade complete with armor plating and built-in surveillance optics. Is it ridiculous? Certainly. And yet, look at the fossils. They tell a story so abrupt, so dramatic, that even the most grounded observer cannot help but marvel. From blind drifting to sharp-eyed hunting, from passive existence to competitive struggle, the transformation feels less like a gentle unfolding and more like a sudden launch. Conspiracy thrives in such gaps. If there were ever a moment to suspect outside intervention, the Cambrian would be it. And the Earth itself seems to revel in the spectacle. Imagine the seafloor shimmering with shells, each creature glittering like a jewel under filtered sunlight. Imagine predators darting through the water like armored arrows, their eyes scanning for prey, their appendages ready to strike. Imagine prey burrowing into the sand, scrambling for safety, evolving new defenses overnight in the face of relentless attack. It is chaos, yes, but also creation. It is life learning to compete, to innovate, to survive through conflict. The diversity is staggering. Within a short span, nearly every major body plan recognizable in later history appears in some form. It is as though the universe opened a catalogue of biological possibilities and decided to try them all at once. Some succeed, some vanish. But the stage is set for everything that follows. The Cambrian is not just a period, it is a revolution, a sudden bloom of complexity that transforms the entire trajectory of life. And lurking behind this revolution is the delicious conspiratorial question: why so sudden? Why so extravagant? Why does the fossil record erupt here, as if the planet were staging a surprise reveal? The universe, if you listen closely, seems to whisper, boom, explosion, upgrade installed. Humor helps soften the strangeness. Think of it as life's first big costume party. Yesterday, the guests wore simple robes of softness. Today, they arrive in full armor, eyes sparkling, limbs waving, jaws snapping. The Cambrian seas must have looked like an underwater masquerade, with every creature showing off new features, as if competing for the title of most improved. It is biology, yes, but it is also theatre, spectacle, and maybe, just maybe, something more than Earth alone could have scripted. Because here is the unsettling thought. Complexity does not arrive timidly. It arrives with a bang, with shells and eyes and strategies that appear almost too complete. If one were inclined towards suspicion, one might imagine blueprints imported wholesale, innovations borrowed from some grander library of possibilities. Earth's laboratory, it seems, went from experimenting with clay figurines to unleashing full suits of armor overnight. And who supplied the blueprints? That question is the honey that keeps conspiracy buzzing. Perhaps the Cambrian explosion was the moment Earth was noticed. Perhaps some intelligence beyond our world looked down, saw a planet ripe for advancement, and pressed the button. Let there be complexity, they said. Or perhaps not in words but in code, in subtle manipulations of chemistry, in signals we cannot trace. The result? Oceans alive with invention, a stage bursting with new actors, a performance so extravagant it still leaves us breathless, 500 million years later. Yet, whether guided by nature or nudged by something else, the outcome was undeniable. From this point forward, life would never again be simple. The Cambrian marked the birth of competition, of predation, of the constant dance of innovation and defense. Eyes begot stealth, armor begot claws, movement begot pursuit. The game had begun, and once begun it could not stop. There is something thrilling in this thought. The Cambrian is not just history, it is the first great contest, the original tournament of survival. And whether you see it as nature's inevitable leap or as a cosmic upgrade package, the energy of it remains intoxicating. To imagine those seas is to imagine a world suddenly alive with urgency, with purpose, with the thrill of chase and the fear of being caught. The conspiracy, of course, adds its playful edge. Imagine an alien boardroom, beings gathered around a holographic projection of Earth's oceans. One taps a control, the seas shimmer, and suddenly shells form, eyes blink open, predators lunge. The beings nod approvingly. Yes, one says, now it begins. It sounds like science fiction, but when you look at the fossil record, the sudden abundance, the abrupt sophistication, you cannot help but smirk at the possibility. Even the Earth herself seems in on the joke. You wanted life? She whispers. Here, have an explosion. And what an explosion it was. The Cambrian is not just an event, it is a statement. Complexity is here, and it has come all at once. So we sit now, 500 million years later, staring into stone at the remnants of that explosion, shells frozen in rock, eyes fossilized as dark orbs, limbs captured mid-motion. They tell us of a time when the oceans first learned the art of conflict, when the world's first warriors and defenders emerged, when life traded passivity for aggression, simplicity for diversity, drifting for pursuit. They tell us that the Cambrian was life's first great arms race, and maybe, just maybe, its first great experiment in cosmic engineering. And whether you laugh at the conspiracy or linger on it, the mystery remains. The Cambrian is too sudden, too extravagant, too alive to be ignored. It feels less like an accident and more like a reveal, less like a whisper and more like a shout that echoes still in every predator and prey that followed, in every eye that sees, in every limb that moves, in every shell that defends. The Cambrian, then, is Earth's exclamation mark, a declaration written in shells and eyes, a sudden surge of invention that looks suspiciously like an upgrade, and in its glittering chaos, in its shimmering explosion, we still hear the universe chuckle softly, as if to say, "Surprise, you weren't expecting that, were you?" When scientists peer back through 500 million years of stone and sediment, one of the first explanations they reach for is oxygen. It is simple, elegant, and compelling. Oxygen is the fuel that powers complex life, the molecule that allows cells to burn energy efficiently, that permits muscles to contract and brains to fire. Without oxygen, large and active creatures cannot exist. With oxygen, suddenly, the world is open for business. So when researchers point out that oxygen levels rose to perhaps 10, even 15% of the atmosphere during the crucial interval, it makes perfect sense to see this as the spark that lit the fire of complexity. Imagine it, the oceans rich with oxygen, the air holding more of it than ever before, cells now capable of greater energy throughput, tissues that can sustain motion, speed, predation, skeletons mineralizing, shells forming, vision sharpening. In this view, oxygen is the match that ignites the blaze. The story is tidy, chemistry changes, life responds, complexity flourishes. Climate too plays its role in this tale. During this same stretch of time, Earth's climate was relatively warm and stable, with global temperatures somewhere between 15 and 25 degrees Celsius. That is, for creatures just beginning to test the limits of multicellularity, almost a Goldilocks range. Not too hot, not too cold. Shallow seas spread across continental margins, flooded with sunlight and nutrients, offering real estate for life to expand. Warm waters speed metabolism. Stable climates allow ecosystems to establish without constant disruption. It is tempting to see the Cambrian explosion, or any great burst of complexity, as simply the outcome of oxygen and warmth combining in perfect measure, as though the Earth had finally found the recipe and baked life to perfection. But even as this explanation charms, cracks appear in its surface. Oxygen is necessary, yes, but is it sufficient? After all, oxygen had been rising gradually for millions of years before the burst of shells and eyes. Why did complexity wait until this exact moment? If oxygen alone were the key, one might expect a slower, more progressive unveiling, not the sudden abundance that actually appears in the record. The same is true for climate. Warmth and stability are wonderful, but such conditions had existed before, in other intervals, without yielding an explosion of armored predators and diverse body plans. Why then does this warmth produce fireworks when other periods did not? Scientists, ever cautious, add layers of nuance. Perhaps oxygen reached a tipping point, a threshold beyond which complexity could no longer be held back. Perhaps warm seas and abundant oxygen worked together in a delicate synergy, amplifying each other's effects. But still the question lingers, quietly unsettling. Do oxygen and climate alone really account for the abruptness, the scale, the sheer extravagance of the Cambrian diversification? This is where speculation seeps in like mist through a canyon. For those with a taste for mystery, the official story feels just a little too tidy, a little too underwhelming for such a spectacular event. After all, saying oxygen rose, the climate was nice and so life exploded, is rather like explaining the sudden rise of human civilization by pointing out that wheat grows well in temperate valleys. True, yes, but hardly the whole story. Something feels missing, some deeper spark, some hidden hand. And when science leaves a gap, conspiracy slips in with a grin. What if oxygen and climate were not the whole picture but merely the stage setting? What if something else, unseen and unacknowledged, pushed life over the edge? A subtle nudge, a coded signal, a recalibration of DNA itself. In other words, what if the Cambrian explosion was not merely fueled by oxygen, but orchestrated by a greater intelligence? The thought is both absurd and irresistible. Imagine extraterrestrial caretakers arriving to find Earth's oxygen levels climbing, the seas warm and ready. Perfect, they say. The conditions are now right. With a flick of technology or a tweak of molecular code, they introduce complexity, shells, eyes, appendages, predation. Suddenly the Cambrian is alive, a blooming carnival of innovation. To the scientist, this is fantasy. To the late-night dreamer, it is simply too delicious to dismiss. But let us not rush too far into cosmic laboratories. Let us linger a moment longer on the scientific side, because even there, doubt refuses to vanish. Consider oxygen again. Geochemical evidence suggests levels fluctuated, rising and falling in pulses rather than climbing in a smooth line. Did life wait for one particular pulse, one final surge? Or is the data itself a mirage, a patchwork of incomplete samples that exaggerates the neatness of the story? The truth is, even oxygen's timeline remains uncertain, its role fuzzy. And climate, yes, it was warm, but stability is not absolute. Ice sheets had only recently retreated, and carbon dioxide levels may still have been volatile. Can such an imperfect backdrop truly explain the perfect storm of diversification? Even among scientists, whispers of dissatisfaction echo. Oxygen and climate, they say, are necessary but not sufficient. They are conditions, not causes. They describe the environment, not the spark. Complexity in their eyes may require more than fuel. It may require ignition. And here the imagination, both scientific and conspiratorial, begins to speculate about what that ignition might have been. Perhaps it was ecological interaction, predators pressuring prey, prey inventing defenses, a spiral of innovation. Perhaps it was genetic innovation, new developmental pathways, opening the floodgates of possibility. Perhaps it was something else entirely, a factor still unseen. And for those inclined to darker, stranger musings, perhaps it was intervention. The humor of this idea is irresistible. Scientists stand with their charts and graphs pointing solemnly to oxygen curves and temperature estimates, while the conspiratorial mind chuckles. Yes, yes, oxygen rose, but who adjusted the dial? It is as if the Earth were a laboratory flask, oxygen bubbling in at just the right rate, climate tuned to just the right degree, and then click, a switch thrown from outside. The ingredients were there, yes, but the recipe feels cooked, prepared, manipulated. Imagine, if you will, a cosmic technician leaning over Earth's oceans, watching the oxygen needle rise. When it hovers around 10%, the technician smiles, presses a button, and mutters, "Now." The seas erupt with armored swimmers, with eyes glinting, with predators chasing prey. The Cambrian begins not as a slow build, but as a grand unveiling. Oxygen and climate are the backdrop, but the play itself, in this view, was staged. Of course, mainstream science rejects such speculation. It insists on mechanisms grounded in geology, chemistry, biology. But even within that framework, one cannot escape the sense that the explanations leave something unsaid. Oxygen rose, yes, but oxygen had risen before. Climate warmed, yes, but warmth had graced the planet in other times. The Cambrian explosion remains too sharp, too sudden, too extravagant to rest comfortably on oxygen and temperature alone. And so we are left with a strange duality. On one hand, the scientific account, rising oxygen, stabilizing climate, ecological opportunity. On the other, the conspiratorial whisper, adjustment, intervention, cosmic calibration. The truth may lie somewhere in between, or beyond both, but the whisper lingers, playful and unsettling. Do not believe oxygen alone. Do not believe climate alone. Something else was at work. And perhaps that is the real lesson of this chapter in Earth's story. Science offers explanations that are necessary but partial. Conspiracy offers stories that are wild but strangely satisfying. Between them lies the enduring mystery: why did life erupt with such suddenness, such brilliance, such extravagance? Oxygen and climate may have laid the foundation, but the architecture of the Cambrian explosion still feels like a surprise party thrown by forces we do not fully understand. In the end, the fossils remain. Shells pressed into stone, eyes fossilized as dark circles, appendages captured mid-motion. They speak of a time when life took a leap so dramatic it still echoes through every predator and prey alive today. Science tells us oxygen and climate helped. Imagination tells us something more might have nudged the leap. The Earth, meanwhile, says nothing at all. She keeps her secrets, whispers only through stone, and laughs quietly at our attempts to explain her mysteries. So the story continues. Oxygen rising, climate warming, shells forming, eyes opening. Necessary conditions. Yes, but not the whole story. For the Cambrian explosion, like all great mysteries, resists neat closure. It invites curiosity, speculation, even conspiracy. It reminds us that the universe loves a twist, a surprise, an unexplained flourish, and in the quiet of night, when oxygen levels and climate curves feel too simple, too small for the grandeur of the Cambrian, the imagination leans in and asks the forbidden question, who or what turned the key? What if evolution, that grand and patient sculptor, had a little help? What if instead of a slow and steady climb, life's great leap from gentle drifting to armored combat was nudged forward by hands, or perhaps technologies, not of this earth? It is the kind of thought that belongs in late-night conversations, the kind of idea you laugh at and then moments later find yourself oddly unsettled by. The Cambrian explosion, that sudden burst of shells, eyes, limbs, and predators, looks suspiciously like an upgrade, as though someone pressed install new features on the software of life. And if so, who did the programming? The conspiracy whispers, extraterrestrials, cosmic visitors, alien engineers, interstellar gardeners. Choose your metaphor. They arrive not in blazing ships for all to see, but quietly, secretly, in the chemistry of Earth's oceans. They study the Ediacaran world, soft, passive, unhurried, and decide it needs improvement. Too gentle, too static, too limited. Version 1, they say. Interesting, but not competitive. So they adjust the code. They splice in new genes, insert new instructions, seed new traits. Hard shells appear, eyes open, predators stir, life is upgraded. It is, in many ways, the perfect science fiction twist. The Ediacaran is a world of dreamers, a soft rehearsal. The Cambrian is a world of warriors, a sudden performance. Between them lies a leap too sharp, too dramatic, too extravagant to satisfy everyone with oxygen charts and climate curves. So the imagination takes over. Maybe it wasn't Earth alone that made the leap. Maybe it was a partnership, one side microbial and earthly, the other cosmic and advanced. Think of it like a software patch. The Ediacaran was version 1.0, functional but limited, beautiful but passive. Then comes version 2.0, new features, enhanced graphics, improved performance, armor plating, check. Complex eyes, check. Active predation and pursuit, installed. Suddenly the oceans are alive with innovation. And who installs patches? Not the system itself, but the programmer. In this story, evolution is not just natural selection, but assisted selection. Not blind trial and error, but guided experimentation. Skeptics, of course, scoff. They roll their eyes and point out the lack of evidence. No crashed ships, no alien fossils, no extraterrestrial toolkits buried in Cambrian strata. Science insists there is no proof. But conspiracies do not need proof. They thrive on the absence of it. In fact, the absence is fuel. The missing links, the sudden burst, the lack of gradual transition, all of it feels to the conspiratorial mind like exactly the kind of clean slate one would expect from an intervention, as if the visitors tidied up after themselves, leaving only the upgraded version behind. Humor helps carry the absurdity. Picture alien scientists in white lab coats, or whatever passes for lab coats in their culture, standing over a holographic display of Earth's oceans. One frowns, taps a glowing panel, and says, "These organisms are too static. Add mobility." Another shrugs, adjusts a dial, and replies, "Fine, let's also give them armor, and while we're at it, install eyes." Vision always shakes things up. A third leans in, smirking. Don't forget the predators. Competition is the best teacher, and with a flash of cosmic code, the oceans fill with armored creatures darting through the water, eyes glinting, claws snapping. The Cambrian explosion is not an accident. It is a deliberate upgrade. The Earth in this view becomes a test site, a planetary laboratory. The Ediacaran organisms were prototypes, gentle models to test the basics of multicellularity. Once the prototypes proved viable, the aliens or interstellar experimenters or cosmic gardeners stepped in and launched Phase 2. The Cambrian was the beta test of predation, competition, complexity. From their perspective, the oceans were ready. Oxygen was sufficient, climate favorable, time to push the program forward. Of course, conspiracy theories love the gaps. And here the gap is not just the leap itself, but the lack of fossils linking the two worlds. Where are the transitional forms, the intermediate steps? Nowhere to be found, or at least rarely enough that the record feels eerily clean. To some, this absence is simply the imperfection of fossilization. To others, it is evidence of erasure, a sign that the programmers wiped the slate before launching their upgrade. After all, what better way to hide intervention than to remove the evidence of transition? Leave the before, leave the after, erase the middle. Scientists scratch their heads. Conspiracists smile knowingly. But let us linger on the playfulness of the idea, because it is almost too perfect a metaphor. Evolution in this story is like a cosmic video game. Level 1, soft-bodied creatures drifting passively. Level 2, armored predators with vision and speed. The aliens, as game designers, decide the difficulty needs to be raised. Passive life is not interesting enough. Predation makes the game dynamic, forces creativity, drives innovation, so they press reset, load the new level, and watch the chaos unfold. It is not malice, it is design, entertainment perhaps. Experimentation surely. The humor deepens when we imagine the aliens debating the features. Give them shells, one says. No, give them eyes, another insists. What about both? Fine, but the Cambrian becomes not just an explosion of life, but an explosion of options, as though multiple design teams each submitted their prototypes at once. The result is a riot of forms, some successful, some bizarre, some vanishing quickly, others laying the groundwork for entire future lineages. It is less a smooth progression and more a cosmic brainstorming session. And yet, beneath the humor, the idea tugs at something deeper. Why does the Cambrian feel so sudden, so extravagant? Why does it resemble less a natural unfolding and more a reveal, a grand unveiling, a curtain lifted on a new act of life's play? Conspiracy offers its answer, because it was staged. The aliens were the directors, Earth the stage, life the actors. The curtain rose, and the Cambrian began. Skepticism, of course, remains essential. There is no proof, only suggestion, only coincidence interpreted as evidence. But conspiracy does not demand proof. It demands curiosity. It thrives on the strange fit of puzzle pieces, on the places where science admits uncertainty, and the Cambrian explosion, even today, remains one of those places. Scientists admit the causes are complex, layered, perhaps unknowable in full detail. That admission is an opening. Into it, the conspiratorial mind slips, weaving stories of alien upgrades and cosmic laboratories. It is easy to laugh, and perhaps one should. The thought of extraterrestrials crouched over Earth's oceans, tweaking DNA, pressing buttons, adjusting code, is absurd, but it is also strangely satisfying. It explains the suddenness. It explains the extravagance. It explains the leap without transition. And it offers a narrative that science, for all its charts and graphs, cannot provide. Intention, purpose, a story with designers, not just accident. Even the Earth seems to play along with the joke. Yes, she whispers in her ancient rocks. My guests were busy. Fossils glitter with sudden complexity. Shells flash like badges of new membership in the club of survival. Eyes gleam as though turned on by a switch. It all looks suspiciously like design. And so the Earth smiles quietly, saying nothing more, letting us wonder whether she hosted visitors long before we ever imagined the stars as reachable. The conspiracy does not need to be true to be powerful. It only needs to be possible enough to provoke thought. Maybe aliens did not intervene. Maybe the Cambrian was entirely Earth's own doing, a natural eruption of possibility. But maybe, just maybe, the universe had other plans. Maybe life's upgrade was not an accident, but an appointment. And if so, what does that mean for us, the distant descendants of those armor-dyed predatory pioneers? Are we still running on alien code, still shaped by instructions not entirely our own? It is a question without answer, but perhaps that is the point. Conspiracies live not in proof, but in possibility. They are the shadows cast by unanswered questions, the laughter that echoes when explanations fall short. The Cambrian Explosion, with its suddenness and its spectacle, will always invite such shadows. And in those shadows, the whisper lingers, upgraded, improved, not alone. So the story ends not with resolution, but with mystery. Scientists will continue to measure oxygen levels and climate curves. Fossil hunters will continue to scrape stone for transitional forms. But conspirators will continue to smile, shake their heads, and say, of course there are no transitions. They were erased. The upgrade was installed, and somewhere perhaps the universe chuckles, enjoying the spectacle of a species that still wonders whether its earliest ancestors were not merely the children of Earth, but the adoptees of the star. Picture the sky in its ancient form, dark and vast, with streaks of ice and dust wandering through the void. Comets, messengers from the outer reaches of the solar system, icy travelers that sweep close to the sun before vanishing again into the cold. To us they are beautiful but distant, tails glowing across the night sky. But what if those streaks of light were more than ornaments? What if they were gardeners? What if they carried seeds, not of trees or flowers, but of life itself? The conspiracy whispers that Earth's story may have begun not entirely on Earth, that the strange organisms of the Ediacaran, soft-bodied and dreamlike, were not homegrown at all, but seeded from afar. Comets, carrying fragments of DNA, proteins, or even entire cells frozen within their icy cores, may have struck Earth and planted the first biological templates. A gift or an experiment delivered from the star. The Ediacaran, in this view, was not simply Earth's invention, but the result of cosmic seeding, panspermia with a conspiratorial twist. Science has played with this idea too, of course. Panspermia, the hypothesis that life's building blocks, or even life itself, could travel across space on comets or meteoroids, is a respectable fringe in biology and astronomy. Laboratory experiments have shown that some amino acids and organic molecules can indeed form in the harsh conditions of space and survive the fiery descent of a comet's impact. It is not unthinkable that comets carried ingredients for life, sprinkling them across planets like cosmic fertilizer. But here conspiracy takes the concept further, spinning it into a deliberate act. Not just seeds drifting by chance, but seeds sown with intent. Imagine it, a comet streaking through the darkness, carrying not random chemistry but a carefully chosen cargo. Encoded within its frozen interior lies the blueprint for multicellular life, dormant, wait. When the comet collides with Earth's oceans, the ice melts, the blueprint is released, and the first wave of strange organisms unfurls across the seafloor. Discs, fronds, quilted forms, the Ediacaran dreamscape begins not as an accident, but as the sprouting of seeds planted by a cosmic gardener. Earth becomes less the origin and more the soil. It is a story that feels both absurd and strangely poetic. The idea that we are, in some sense, the children of comets, the offspring of icy messengers, makes the universe feel less distant and more intimate. Those glowing tails in the night sky may not just be decoration, but ancestry. When we look up, we may be seeing our distant family tree. But the conspiracy does not stop there. It suggests that comets did not just plant the seeds once and leave. They returned. They carried more than molecules. They carried instructions. The Ediacaran organisms, seeded and growing, were only the first phase. When the time was right, perhaps millions of years later, another comet, or perhaps a wave of them, brought the next step. Not new organisms, but triggers, genetic switches, cosmic keys to unlock dormant codes already embedded in the Ediacaran forms. When the comets returned, the genes activated, shells hardened, eyes opened, predators stirred. The Cambrian explosion was not spontaneous. It was an activation event. To imagine it is to picture comets not as wanderers but as couriers. They deliver packages of biology, updates to the code of life. The Ediacaran was phase 1, installed quietly, passively, almost like a pilot program. The Cambrian was phase 2, triggered by the delivery of cosmic activation keys. Suddenly, life leapt into complexity, not because Earth alone demanded it, but because the universe flipped a switch. Skeptics laugh. They shake their heads and say, "Show us the comet fossils, show us the alien DNA, show us the evidence." And indeed, science admits no such proof. The panspermia hypothesis, though intriguing, remains speculative. But conspiracy theories thrive not on evidence, but on possibility. And here possibility is fertile. The missing transitions, the sudden appearance of hard shells and predation, the abrupt burst of complexity, all of it feels strangely compatible with the idea of external triggers. Earth as a host, the universe as the gardener, comets as the watering can. Humor makes the idea even more entertaining. Imagine comets as cosmic delivery trucks, each one carrying frozen packages of genetic information, special delivery for planet Earth. One comet announces as it blazes through the atmosphere, slamming into the ocean with a hiss of steam. The DNA parcels melt, seep into cells, and like software patches, update the code of life. Version 1.0, passive fronds. Version 2.0, armored predators. All delivered free of charge, courtesy of interstellar shipping. No signature required. Even Earth herself seems to wink at the idea. Fossils from the Ediacaran look like seeds pressed into stone, soft imprints without clear descendants. Fossils from the Cambrian look like sudden blooms, a garden erupting into chaotic color. What gardener plants seeds without eventually returning to harvest or to prune? The comets, in this view, were the gardeners, sprinkling the first spores and then returning later to activate their growth. Earth was not the sole author of life, but the canvas. The brushstrokes came from beyond. Science offers its cautions, of course. Of course, the leap remains unexplained but not unexplainable. Oxygen, climate, ecology, all can be invoked as mechanisms. Yet even within science, panspermia lingers as an alluring possibility. If amino acids can form in interstellar dust, if complex molecules can survive in comets, then who is to say life did not hitchhike to Earth? And once one accepts that possibility, conspiracy simply stretches it further. What if panspermia was not random but intentional? What if the seeds were planted deliberately, their activation timed, their outcomes monitored? It is, admittedly, a story that requires faith and secrecy. For if comets were gardeners, where are the gardeners now? Did they leave us to grow wild, satisfied with their experiment? Do they still watch, waiting for the next update, the next activation, the next great leap? Or was it never beings at all, but the universe itself, a kind of cosmic algorithm scattering seeds across planets, running endless experiments until one blooms? The beauty of the conspiracy is that it does not need answers. It thrives on the question itself. It transforms comets from icy wanderers into characters in a drama, agents of life's unfolding. And it reframes Earth not as the center of creation, but as one of many test plots in a vast cosmic garden. Somewhere out there, perhaps, other comets struck other planets, planting other seeds, triggering other explosions. Perhaps we are not alone. Not just because others exist now, but because others were seeded in parallel. The humor of the idea is in its grand simplicity. Life is complicated, science says. It requires delicate conditions, rare alignments. The conspiracy smiles and replies, or maybe it's easy. Maybe the universe just throws comets around like dandelion seeds. Some land on barren soil and vanish. Some land on fertile ground and bloom. And we, here on Earth, are just one of the blooms. Suddenly the impossible feels almost casual, like the universe sowing wildflowers across the galaxy. And yet, the conspiracy remains sly, for it is not enough to say comets seeded life. It insists they returned, that the Cambrian was not simply an accident of biology, but the flowering of a second phase, that somewhere in the genetic code of the Ediacaran organisms lay dormant instructions, foreign sequences awaiting activation. When the comets came again, they delivered the trigger, the signal, the activation code. The result was an explosion so dramatic it still echoes in every predator and prey alive today. The Earth, if she could speak, might laugh at our theories. "My seeds are special," she would whisper, her voice rumbling through stone. "They came from afar. They grew in silence. And when the time was right, they bloomed in fire and chaos. It is not proof, but it is poetry. And in the absence of certainty, poetry sometimes feels as true as data. So we are left with the vision comets blazing across the sky, not as accidents, but as couriers, gardeners, cosmic mail carriers. They plant life. They deliver upgrades. They carry the keys that unlock dormant codes. Earth blooms with organisms, soft and strange, then blooms again with shells and eyes and claws. Science scratches its head, pointing at oxygen and climate. Conspiracy smiles and points at the sky. Are we truly the children of Earth, or are we the grandchildren of comets? Did life begin in warm ponds and tidal flats, or in icy cores millions of kilometers away? Did the Cambrian explosion erupt from earthly pressures, or from cosmic activation? The answers remain elusive, the fossils stubbornly silent, but the conspiracy lingers, a whisper carried on starlight, seeded, planted, activated. And perhaps that is the most satisfying ending of all. Not certainty, but wonder. Not answers, but questions. Comets streak across the night sky even now, their tails glowing as they vanish into the dark. We watch them, we marvel at their beauty, and perhaps deep down we feel a kinship, for maybe, just maybe, we are their descendants. History, as recorded in stone, often reads like a book with torn-out pages. One chapter ends quietly, the next begins explosively, and somewhere between them the story of how we got from here to there has vanished. The Ediacaran and Cambrian are among the strangest of these torn pages, two worlds of life that look almost unrelated, divided not by smooth transition but by absence. Scientists struggle to explain it, whispering about extinction, shifts in environment, incomplete preservation, but the conspiratorial imagination, always eager to fill silence with intrigue, offers another explanation: erasure. What if the Ediacaran world, with its soft-bodied organisms and gentle existence, was not simply an early chapter of evolution, but a cosmic experiment, a trial run, conducted not by Earth alone, but by forces greater than Earth, forces that might span the stars? In this view, the Ediacaran organisms were prototypes, test models, deployed in the laboratory of the oceans. They grew, they spread, they painted the seafloor with their quilted bodies, and then at some cosmic boardroom far away, the results were deemed unsatisfactory, too passive, too fragile, too strange to carry forward. The experiment was declared a failure, and like any failed experiment, it was erased. The slate was wiped clean, and in its place, a new design was installed: the Cambrian Explosion, a world of armor, eyes, predators, and prey. It sounds absurd, of course, but look at the record itself. The Ediacaran organisms leave behind few clear descendants. They seem to fade out, vanish without leaving heirs. Whole families of shapes appear to terminate abruptly, their lineages dissolving into silence. To science, this is baffling. To conspiracy, this is evidence. Failed experiments don't leave heirs. They are terminated, archived, and replaced. Imagine the Ediacaran as version 0.9 of life. Strange, experimental, functional, but unsatisfying. Imagine cosmic experimenters watching carefully, noting the results. Multicellularity, check. Large size, check. Ecological stability, check. But predation? Missing. Competition? Weak. Innovation limited. Verdict: restart. With the flick of some unimaginable switch, the experiment was ended. Evidence was erased, lineages were cut, and a new experiment, the Cambrian, was launched. It is not just the disappearance that fuels this theory, it is the cleanliness of it. Evolution, as we know it, tends to be messy. Transitions overlap, lineages blur, survivors linger. Yet, here, the handoff feels almost surgical. One world ends, another begins, and the bridge between them is nearly empty. To the conspiratorial mind, this is too neat to be natural. It looks less like extinction and more like deletion. Humor sneaks into the idea because how else can one handle such extravagance? Picture extraterrestrial scientists hunched over Earth's seafloor as if it were a laboratory bench. One scratches their head and mutters, "The discs are too floppy, the fronds are decorative, but they don't fight. This isn't going anywhere." Another nods, tapping a cosmic clipboard. "Agreed. Initiate reset protocol." A third presses a glowing button labeled "Delete experiment." The ocean quivers, the organisms vanish, and the stage is cleared. Moments, or rather millions of years later, the Cambrian debuts, dazzling and ferocious. A new experiment, a new hypothesis, a new chance at complexity. The Earth in this narrative is not a passive sphere, but a laboratory floor swept clean between experiments. The Ediacaran was a trial, the Cambrian the official release, and the fossils we now unearth are not just records of life, but notes in the margin of an experiment that was abandoned. Each impression in stone whispers, prototype, test phase, discontinued. Science, for its part, prefers less dramatic explanations. It suggests that Ediacaran organisms were simply wiped out by changing conditions, a shift in chemistry, a loss of stable niches, the arrival of competition. But notice how vague that feels, how unsatisfying. They disappeared, science admits, and we don't know why. Into that uncertainty, conspiracy weaves its story of erasure. Perhaps it wasn't an accident at all. Perhaps someone or something decided it was time for a new experiment. The imagery is almost cinematic. Picture the Earth as a cosmic chalkboard, filled with chalk drawings of disks and fronds. Then a great hand sweeps across the surface, erasing them all in a single gesture. The chalk dust lingers, faint impressions remain, but the drawings are gone. Then the hand begins again, sketching armored forms, eyes, claws, movement, from dreamlike stillness to dazzling competition, as if someone had flipped the genre of the story. Yesterday, a slow meditation. Today, an action film. The conspiracy grows richer when one considers the lack of clear continuity. If the Cambrian organisms had evolved smoothly from Ediacaran ancestors, we might expect to see traces of transition. But the Ediacaran fossils often resist categorization, standing apart, refusing to fit neatly into later lineages. To some, this is simply a puzzle. To others, it is confirmation. They were erased not because they failed to fossilize properly, but because they were meant to leave no heirs. The experiment was discontinued, its blueprints shredded, its prototypes archived, and yet the traces remain, ghostly imprints in stone, like signatures of a hidden experiment. They are faint enough to puzzle us, but clear enough to remind us that something lived here before the Cambrian bloom. They are not quite evidence, not quite absent. They are the fingerprints of erasure itself. The humor deepens when one imagines the cosmic experimenters filing their reports. Ediacaran trial. Results inconclusive. Organisms demonstrated size scaling, but lacked competitive dynamics. Recommendation: erase trial. Initiate Cambrian protocol. Somewhere in a galactic archive, perhaps, there is a file marked Ediacaran fail. Meanwhile, Earth's rocks preserve only the faintest hints, as if the planet herself tried to remember what the universe wanted us to forget. Skeptics will demand evidence, as they always do. Where is the alien machinery? The cosmic clipboard? The erased files? But conspiracy does not thrive on evidence. It thrives on its absence. The neatness of the transition, the abruptness of the Cambrian, the lack of continuity, all become the evidence of erasure. Of course you don't see proof. The conspiracy smiles. That's how good the cleanup was. Earth herself seems to play coy in this narrative. "My experiment has changed," she whispers through stone. "Don't ask about the first one. Don't dig too deep. They erased it for a reason." The fossils of the Ediacaran are her secret diary, partially burned, half legible, half destroyed. We can read fragments, but never the whole story. The rest was erased, deliberately, efficiently, by hands unseen. Why erase at all? The conspiratorial imagination has answers ready. Perhaps the Ediacaran organisms were a failed design, unable to adapt, too fragile to justify continuation. Perhaps their biology held flaws invisible to us but obvious to their experimenters, or perhaps the experiment achieved its limited goals, proving that multicellular life could spread, and was then ended, so that a new trial could begin. In this sense, the erasure was not punishment, but progress. A new canvas, wiped clean for the next masterpiece. The Cambrian, then, is not just an explosion of life, but the debut of version 2, installed after version 1 was removed. And the absence of intermediates is not a mystery, but a clue. Erased experiments leave gaps. They leave clean break. They leave us, millions of years later, scratching our heads and spinning conspiracies. Even humor bows to mystery in the end. For all the jokes about alien scientists pressing reset buttons, the idea carries a certain haunting weight. What if we truly are the product of experiments erased and replaced? What if our ancestors are not the Ediacaran organisms themselves, but the Cambrian upgrades that followed their deletion? In that sense, we are the children not of continuity but of erasure. Our story begins not with a gentle unfolding, but with a restart. It is unsettling, it is absurd, it is strangely poetic, and it lingers because the evidence is incomplete, because the fossils resist clarity, because the earth herself is coy. She shows us just enough to puzzle us, never enough to satisfy. She offers us imprints of vanished organisms, and then waves her stone arms as if to say, "Don't ask." That was just a trial. The real story began later. So the conspiracy whispers on. The Ediacaran was an experiment, the Cambrian its replacement, and the gap between them is the mark of deliberate erasure. A cosmic reset button pressed, a stage cleared for a new performance. Scientists shake their heads. Conspiracists smile. The earth laughs softly in stone, and somewhere, perhaps far away, the experimenters file their reports, preparing for the next trial in some other ocean, on some other world. Every mystery comes with a shadow, and every shadow invites suspicion. When people look at the fossil record of Earth's earliest complex life, they see a pattern that seems oddly incomplete. Soft-bodied beings vanish, armored predators appear, and the bridge between them is missing. Scientists, shrugging, call it a gap, but conspiracists smile and call it something else entirely, a cover-up. The whisper is simple. Maybe the fossils exist, maybe the transitions are real, but we are not allowed to see them. Perhaps they are locked away in museum basements, hidden in government archives, buried under red tape instead of sediment. Perhaps the very institutions we trust to reveal the truth are the ones concealing it. And why? To protect cherished theories, to maintain intellectual control, or most deliciously, to hide the evidence of extraterrestrial involvement in life's story. Imagine the scene. Somewhere beneath a famous natural history museum, a dusty storeroom lies locked. Within it are boxes not on public display, crates of fossils that never made the headlines. Among them, a handful of specimens that don't fit neatly into the evolutionary tree, not quite Ediacaran, not quite Cambrian, something in between, something that would rewrite textbooks if revealed. But instead of glory, these fossils earn secrecy. Curators quietly file them away, muttering about lack of context or insufficient clarity. Officially, they do not exist. Unofficially, they gather dust in the dark, their whispers muffled by bureaucracy. Governments, too, are cast as villains in this story. Conspiracists imagine classified vaults where inconvenient fossils lie beside UFO reports and ancient artifacts, perhaps somewhere in a desert military base, alongside wreckage said to have fallen from the sky. There are slabs of stone bearing impressions that don't belong. Fossils that show traits out of time, hybrids that connect the unconnectable, and because such fossils would suggest interference, alien or otherwise, they must be kept secret. Better to let the public believe in tidy theories than to risk unraveling the narrative. Science itself, though often painted as the pursuit of truth, is not immune to suspicion. In the conspiratorial imagination, scientists are not only seekers, but gatekeepers. They publish papers that reinforce the accepted framework, but quietly suppress those that threaten it. Graduate students who stumble on anomalous fossils are told to reinterpret them, to frame them safely, or to leave them unpublished. Grants, careers, reputations all depend on conformity, and so the transitional fossils remain hidden not in basements but in plain sight, mislabeled, ignored, or reinterpreted until they pose no threat. It is, of course, a caricature, but a compelling one. After all, institutions have hidden things before. Governments classify information, museums keep thousands of specimens in storage, unseen by the public. Scientists, being human, do cling to theories and resist disruption. So the leap from real secrecy to imagined conspiracy is small. All it takes is a missing fossil here, an unexplained gap there, and suspicion grows like mold in the damp corners of uncertainty. Humor makes the suspicion palatable. One can easily picture a secret warehouse, shelves stacked high with boxes labeled "Do Not Open," transitional fossils inside. Somewhere, a bored guard sips coffee beside crates stamped with stencils. Ediacaran Cambrian link. Top secret. Meanwhile, upstairs, scientists confidently declare in lectures no transitional fossils exist. The audience applauds, unaware that beneath their feet lies a fossil slab that would make the statement obsolete. It's absurd, yes, but the absurdity makes it fun. The Earth herself seems to wink in this story. "My records are sealed," she whispers through stone. "You may dig, but you will not find. Not because they are not there, but because your own kind hides them." It is the ultimate irony. Humans, not nature, become the obstacle to truth, and conspiracy thrives on irony. The motives imagined are many. Some say fossils are hidden to protect Darwinian theory, to prevent the chaos of rewriting biology textbooks worldwide. Others claim governments suppress them because they point to alien origins, and admitting such origins would destabilize religion, politics, or society itself. Still others argue that concealment is less dramatic, but more human. Scientists bury anomalies simply to protect their own prestige, avoiding the embarrassment of being wrong. Whatever the motive, the result is the same. The truth is locked away, kept in shadows, erased not by time but by people. Of course, science protests. Paleontologists insist they would celebrate finding transitional fossils, that such discoveries would make careers rather than ruin them. Museums admit their basements are full, but not with secrets, just with overflow specimens waiting for study. Governments, if pressed, laugh at the idea of hoarding fossils. But protests in conspiracy thinking are part of the cover-up. Of course they deny it. The conspiracies say, "That's how you know it's true." The beauty of this theory is its unforeseeability. If you find no fossils, it proves they were hidden. If you find odd fossils, it proves they were misinterpreted. If you find conventional fossils, it proves the institutions are only releasing safe material. No matter what the evidence, the cover-up survives. It is not a theory of discovery. It is a theory of secrecy. And secrecy needs no fossils at all, only silence. The narrative deepens when conspiracists weave in familiar tropes: secret government vaults, anonymous whistleblowers, suppressed research papers. Stories circulate of paleontologists who stumbled on anomalies and then went quiet, their careers mysteriously redirected. Tales are told of crates shipped quietly between institutions, their contents never catalogued. Whether true or not, these stories fill the gap between fact and suspicion, giving texture to the conspiracy. Even humor cannot mask the unease of it. For if the fossils are hidden, then history itself is being rewritten by omission. We are told one story while another lies locked away. And if that is true, then our understanding of our origins is not just incomplete. It is manipulated. That thought is unsettling enough to make even skeptics pause. But perhaps the real charm of this conspiracy is its theatricality. Imagine the grand reveal. One day, a whistleblower leaks photographs of fossils that bridge the gap, unmistakably transitional. A disc-shaped imprint with the beginnings of a shell, a frond-like body with eyes forming at its edge, a creature halfway between dreamlike softness and armored complexity. The world gasps, textbooks crumble, scientists scramble, governments hold press conferences, stammering denials. Theories shift overnight, and conspiracists lean back, triumphant, saying, "We told you so." Until that day, if it ever comes, the suspicion lingers like perfume in the air. Perhaps there is nothing hidden. Perhaps the fossils truly are missing. But perhaps in some dark archive, the slabs already exist. Perhaps the story has been rewritten, not by nature but by us. Perhaps we are the ones who have erased the evidence, not the Earth. The Earth, if she could speak, might laugh at our paranoia. You don't need to invent conspiracies, she might whisper. I am mystery enough. And yet, the conspiratorial imagination cannot resist. The missing fossils are not simply lost. They are hidden, not by erosion or chance, but by choice. Someone holds the keys. Someone guards the vault. Someone decides what we are allowed to know. It is, of course, a story without proof. But conspiracies do not thrive on proof. They thrive on doubt, on gaps, on the irresistible suspicion that we are not being told everything. And when we gaze into the fossil record, staring at the chasm between soft-bodied dreamers and armored hunters, doubt is easy to find. Too easy. So the theory persists. Governments hide the fossils. Scientists guard their theories. Museums lock their crates. Somewhere, transitional fossils exist, but we may never see them until the doors open, until the vaults are revealed. We are left only with suspicion, and suspicion in its own way is as durable as any fossil preserved not in stone but in imagination. And perhaps that is the real fossil of this story, not a shell or a frond, but the enduring belief that someone somewhere is hiding the truth. Fossils are Earth's memory, written not in ink or paper but in stone. They are the diary entries of a planet that rarely speaks, the photographs of lives long vanished, preserved by chance and pressure and time. And yet, as with any diary, the pages are uneven. Some are vivid, detailed, and overflowing with life. Others are blank, smudged, or torn away. Nowhere is this truer than in the strange divide between the Ediacaran and the Cambrian. The fossils we have are vivid enough to astonish, but not continuous enough to explain. They show us two very different worlds back to back, without the connecting thread we crave. Consider the Ediacaran. These fossils, found in places like the sandstone beds of Australia's Flinders Ranges and the ancient rocks of Charnwood Forest in England, are among the oldest large, complex organisms preserved on Earth. They appear as impressions, faint outlines pressed into stone, like the ghostly negatives of life long gone. Some look like discs stamped into mud, others like fronds of seaweed, others like quilted patterns stretched across the seafloor. They have no bones, no shells, no obvious mouths or eyes. They are soft and strange, more like patterns than creatures, more like the planet doodling than designing. Then flip the page of time and you arrive at the Cambrian. Suddenly, the fossils are sharp, dramatic, full of detail. The Burgess Shale in Canada, one of the most famous fossil deposits in the world, reveals a carnival of creatures with articulated limbs, hardened shells, spines and eyes. Unlike the faint outlines of the Ediacaran, the Cambrian fossils look like stills from an action film, predators frozen mid-strike, prey captured in exquisite detail, bodies preserved down to the filaments of their gills. Here life is vivid and ferocious, armored and mobile, bursting with innovation. The difference between these two fossil records is startling. One looks like an abstract painting, the other like a graphic novel. One is soft, passive, impressionistic. The other is dynamic, detailed, full of conflict. And between them lies the problem. There is no clear set of fossils connecting the two, no gradual thickening of body walls, no slow development of limbs, no gentle evolution of eyes. Instead, the fossil record skips from softness to armor, from stillness to motion, from impression to anatomy. Scientists, of course, do not take this lightly. They debate furiously about what the Ediacaran organisms even were. Were they animals, plants, giant single-celled colonies, a failed branch of life altogether? Some researchers argue they were the ancestors of modern groups, sponges, jellyfish or worms. Others argue they belonged to an entirely different experiment in multicellularity, one that left no descendant. Still others suspect they were something so alien to us that our categories fail completely. The debate is lively, unresolved, and sometimes heated, and at its core lies the fossil evidence, or more precisely, the lack of, because what we have is striking but incomplete. The Ediacaran fossils show us soft impressions, but almost never internal structures. We do not see guts, skeletons, or sensory organs. We see outlines, patterns, forms without anatomy. The Cambrian fossils, by contrast, are full of anatomy, jointed limbs, mineralized shells, compound eyes, preserved in astonishing fidelity. The contrast feels almost too sharp. It is like switching channels from a blurry art film to a high-definition documentary, with nothing in between. This absence fuels both scientific frustration and conspiratorial delight. To the scientist, it is a puzzle, a reminder of the limitations of preservation. Soft-bodied creatures do not fossilize easily. They require extraordinary conditions. The Cambrian deposits, like the Burgess Shale, are exceptional, preserving even delicate tissues under rare circumstances. The Ediacaran, by contrast, was preserved mostly by chance. Impressions in microbial mats that captured outlines, but not details. So perhaps the transitions existed, but were never fossilized. Perhaps the intermediate forms swam and crawled, but their remains dissolved before leaving a trace. That is the cautious explanation. But caution does not thrill the imagination. And so the conspiratorial mind leans in, whispering, maybe the fossils were erased. Maybe they were hidden. Maybe someone or something made sure the story was incomplete. After all, the absence is suspiciously neat. We see the before, we see the after, but the middle is gone. That, to the conspiracist, is not coincidence, but intention. Fossils that would reveal the true connection have either been destroyed by time or concealed by hands unwilling to share them. It is, of course, speculation. Yet the speculation persists because the gap is so tantalizing. Scientists argue, but they cannot conjure fossils that do not exist. Conspiracists smile, pointing to the missing pieces as proof of their suspicions, and Earth, silent and secretive, preserves her diary as she always has, partially and completely, with enough to tantalize and not enough to satisfy. The debates among scientists add another layer of intrigue. If the Ediacaran organisms were indeed animals, then why do they vanish so completely? Why do we not see gradual hardening, gradual development, gradual continuity into Cambrian forms? If they were not animals, then what were they? And why did they cover the seafloor in such abundance? Were they a failed experiment, a side branch cut short, or were they successful in ways we cannot recognize, because they did not fit into the categories we know? Every hypothesis opens as many questions as it answers, and the fossils themselves remain stubbornly silent. The Cambrian fossils, meanwhile, shout their existence. They are preserved in spectacular detail, giving us a window into ecosystems alive with predation and defense. And yet, their very clarity makes the lack of transition all the more glaring. It is as if a painter sketched faint outlines for a mural, then suddenly unveiled a finished masterpiece with no drafts in between. The Burgess Shale does not feel like a continuation of the Ediacaran. It feels like a reboot. Humor helps soften the unease. One can imagine the Ediacaran fossils as faded portraits in an ancient gallery, dusty sketches of mysterious ancestors. Then, in the next room, the Cambrian fossils explode like a 3D movie. Action, drama, creatures lunging and swimming, shells glittering under imaginary lights. Visitors scratch their heads and wonder, did someone change the exhibit while we weren't looking? Was there an unseen curator swapping out canvases in the dead of night? The thought is absurd, but the absurdity makes the mystery easier to hold. The conspiracy grows playful in its whispers. Perhaps the missing fossils exist, but they are hidden in secret vaults, locked away by cautious governments or overprotective scientists. Perhaps they are stored in museum basements, mislabeled, ignored, or deliberately concealed. Perhaps more dramatically, they were erased, not by erosion, but by deliberate cosmic cleanup. The story we are told is incomplete, not because of chance, but because of choice. The fossils we see are curated, and the fossils we do not see are the ones that matter most. Science counters with patience. Fossilization is rare, they remind us. Entire ecosystems may vanish without leaving a trace. The Ediacaran and Cambrian were preserved under different conditions. It is no wonder the record looks discontinuous, but patience is not as exciting as suspicion, and so the debate goes on. At its heart, the fossil record between these two eras remains a riddle. The Ediacaran shows us a world of softness, of dreamlike forms pressed into stone. The Cambrian shows us a world of hardness, of articulated, armored creatures captured in stunning detail. Between them lies absence. That absence fuels science, fuels conspiracy, fuels curiosity itself. It is the silence in the song that makes us lean closer, straining to hear the notes we cannot. The earth, for her part, seems amused. My fossils tell a story, she whispers, but not the whole story. Some pages I kept, some I lost, some I tore out myself. Don't assume the book is complete. Don't assume the silence is empty. Sometimes a gap is more revealing than the words themselves. And so we keep searching. Paleontologists continue to comb the Flinders Ranges, the Charnwood Rocks, the Burgess Shale, and dozens of other sites worldwide. Every new fossil is a clue, but none yet has bridged the divide cleanly. Conspiracists continue to imagine vaults and cover-ups, erased evidence and hidden truths. And storytellers, scientific and conspiratorial alike, continue to weave meaning out of the fragments we do have. The fossils remain, silent, incomplete, tantalizing. They are the Earth's diary, but the diary has missing chapters, smudged pages, erased lines. Whether the erasure was by chance, by erosion, or by something more deliberate, is the question that lingers. And in that lingering lies the enduring charm of the mystery. Perhaps one day we will find the missing links. Perhaps in some overlooked rock face, a fossil waits that will connect softness to armor, dream to drama, Ediacaran to Cambrian. Or perhaps we never will, and the silence will remain. Until then, the fossils we have are enough to keep us curious, enough to keep us arguing, enough to keep conspiracies alive. And maybe that is Earth's plan all along. Not to give us answers, but to keep us wondering. If you close your eyes and drift back 500 million years, you will find yourself in oceans that feel both familiar and strange. The waves still crash, the tides still pull, the moon still whispers to the sea, but the waters themselves are different. Chemically, physically, atmospherically, they are Earth's laboratory, warmed by ancient sunlight, stirred by shifting continents, infused with gases drifting down from the air above. In this world, the environment is not just a backdrop, but an active player, shaping the possibilities of life, deciding what is allowed to flourish and what must fade. During the Ediacaran, the oceans were shallow and warm, like vast cosmic bathtubs spread across continental shelves. The seafloor lay beneath a blanket of microbial mats, slimy carpets that coated the sediments. Oxygen was present more than in earlier eons, but still limited, pooling in patches like breath trapped in corners of the room. Nutrients flowed in cycles, sometimes abundant, sometimes scarce. The waters nurtured the first large multicellular organisms, soft, passive, quilt-like forms that rested on the seafloor, taking advantage of these gentle, warm, oxygenated shallows. But as time passed, the stage shifted. By the dawn of the Cambrian, oceans deepened, seas expanded, oxygen levels climbed higher, reaching levels that could support energy-hungry organisms. The chemistry of the water changed. Trace elements shifted. The invisible architecture of nutrients and gases rearranged itself. Temperature stabilized in a range that seems almost designed for biological exuberance. Not scorching, not freezing, but a planetary just right. It is no wonder, then, that scientists point to these environmental changes as the foundation for life's explosion of complexity. The story sounds tidy. Shallow seas deepen, oxygen rises, climates stabilize, and life responds by becoming larger, faster, hungrier. The environment unlocks possibilities, and evolution seizes them. The Cambrian, in this reading, is the natural consequence of chemistry and climate aligning like tumblers in a lock. The ocean is the key, the atmosphere the turning hand, and life the door that swings open into complexity. And yet, the suddenness of it nags. For if the environment alone explains it, why does the transition feel less like a gradual tide and more like a switch being flipped? Oxygen had been increasing for millions of years before the Cambrian. Warmth had existed before, shallow seas had spread before, nutrients had cycled before. Why did the burst happen here, and not earlier? Why does the fossil record show a leap rather than a slope, an explosion rather than a simmer? This is where conspiracy slides in, wearing its sly grin. The environment, it says, was not merely a natural stage. It was adjusted, tuned, calibrated, like a cosmic aquarium whose caretaker decides when to raise the temperature, when to increase the oxygen, when to change the lighting. Perhaps the oceans were not just responding to Earth's internal cycles, but to interventions from outside. Perhaps the shallow seas of the Ediacaran were the test tank, and the deeper, oxygen-rich seas of the Cambrian were the upgraded system, deliberately prepared for a new kind of life. Imagine it, an unseen hand, twisting the planetary dials. The oxygen knob is nudged upward. The carbon dioxide levels are balanced. The seas deepen, stirred by tectonic rearrangements that arrive suspiciously on cue. Temperatures stabilize, nutrients distribute more evenly, and suddenly the planet is not just habitable, but primed. The stage is ready, the lights are set, the curtains drawn back. Enter the Cambrian players, armored and fierce. The environment was not accident, it was preparation. Science frowns at such speculation, insisting that tectonics and chemistry suffice to explain the changes. But even science admits that the timing feels sharp. Oxygen did not simply rise in a smooth curve. It fluctuated, surged, perhaps even pulsed. Was it chance that one of those surges aligned perfectly with the sudden explosion of life? Or was it something more deliberate? Humor softens the edges of the suspicion. One can picture Earth as a giant aquarium tank in a cosmic laboratory, with unseen caretakers adjusting dials. Raise the oxygen to 15%, one says. Drop the temperature a degree or two. Let's see if they start building shells. Another leans in, watching organisms drift. Too quiet. Increase the depth. Add more nutrients. There we go. Now they're moving, and suddenly the tank that once held soft-bodied dreamers now teems with armored swimmers and predators on the prowl. Was it Earth's natural chemistry or cosmic caretaking that triggered the change? The Ediacaran seas had been like bathtubs, shallow, sunlit, full of mats and stillness. The Cambrian seas became like arenas, deeper, oxygen-rich, full of space for new strategies. The contrast is dramatic, almost theatrical, and in that drama lies the suspicion that the stage was not merely evolving, but redesigned. Scientists point to plate tectonics, the shifting of continents, the flooding of shallow shelves, the mixing of oceans. These processes, they argue, explain the shift, and indeed they likely played their part. But why then? Why in that window? Why not earlier? Why not later? Conspiracy delights in these whys. It whispers, because someone chose the timing. The environment was not coincidence. It was calibration. The Earth, in this narrative, becomes coy, like a hostess with secrets. My oceans changed, she whispers through layers of stone. My climate shifted. But don't assume it was all me. Perhaps I had help. Perhaps my guests adjusted the room before the party began. It is playful, absurd, poetic, and strangely alluring. Even the chemistry seems suspicious when viewed conspiratorially. Oxygen rises to just the right threshold to fuel muscles and movement. Temperatures stabilize in the Goldilocks zone for metabolism. Trace minerals like calcium and phosphorus become abundant, perfect for building skeletons and shells. Everything aligns, like ingredients measured out for a recipe. And then on cue, the recipe is baked. The Cambrian explosion bursts forth. Coincidence? Or cosmic cooking? The humor is irresistible. One imagines a cosmic chef stirring the oceans, tasting the broth, adding a pinch more oxygen, a dash of calcium, until satisfied. Yes, the chef declares. Now the stew is ready for shells and claws. The Cambrian, then, is not an accident, but a meal prepared to order. Earth is the kitchen, the universe the cook, and yet beneath the laughter the mystery remains. Scientists cannot deny that the environment supported the explosion, but they also cannot prove that environment alone explains its suddenness. The oceans deepened, the oxygen rose, the climate stabilized. Why did complexity bloom so extravagantly, so abruptly? It is as if the environment provided the tools, but someone else provided the instructions. So we hover between two stories. In one, the environment is the natural stage, evolving through tectonics and chemistry until life responded. In the other, the environment is the adjusted tank, tuned deliberately by hands unseen to prepare for the leap. Both stories fit the evidence, and neither can be proven beyond doubt. That is the beauty and the frustration. The oceans themselves seem to keep the secret. They roll and surge today as they did 500 million years ago, but they do not tell us whether they were merely following physics or following orders. They cradle their fossils in stone, whispering only fragments. Yes, I was shallow. Yes, I deepened. Yes, my oxygen rose. But when we ask why, they fall silent, smiling their saltwater smile. Perhaps the environment was enough. Perhaps oxygen and warmth and depth created the perfect storm for complexity. Or perhaps, as conspiracists suggest, those very conditions were arranged, nudged, adjusted, to ensure the outcome. The truth may be forever locked beneath waves and stone. And so, the mystery lingers. The Ediacaran seas, shallow and soft, gave way to the Cambrian seas, deep and fierce. The environment shifted, undeniably, but whether that shift was coincidence or calibration is the question that haunts the silence. Until we know, we are left with two voices. Science, calm and measured, says, the environment supported life's leap. Conspiracy, playful and sly, says, the environment was adjusted for it. And Earth herself, amused, whispers through her oceans, my waters hide secrets, swim deeper if you dare. But remember, not all currents lead to answers. There are mysteries that lie in the stars, and then there are mysteries that lie in stone. The transition from the Ediacaran to the Cambrian is one of the latter, yet it feels as vast and cosmic as any galaxy we can see. It is a puzzle that does not quite fit into the frameworks we hold, a moment where life seems to change costumes too quickly, slipping out of one role and into another before we have time to understand the script. Soft-bodied organisms vanish. Armored predators appear. The curtain rises on a drama that feels too sudden, too rehearsed, too dramatic to be explained by slow natural steps alone. And so, as we stare into the silence between these two ages, we cannot help but ask, what does it mean? The Ediacaran and Cambrian gap is more than a question of fossils or oxygen. It is a question about the story of life itself. If evolution is supposed to be gradual, why does it sometimes look like revolution? If history is supposed to be continuous, why does it sometimes look like erasure? If life is supposed to be earthly, why does it sometimes look in its suddenness as if it were nudged from beyond? These are not merely scientific questions, but philosophical ones. They pull us beyond data into wonder, beyond theories into speculation, beyond comfort into mystery. One meaning is humility. The gap reminds us that our knowledge is incomplete, that the story of life is far stranger than our textbooks suggest. We imagine evolution as a neat chain, one form leading step by step into another. But the Earth's own diary is messier. Pages missing, ink smudged, entries crossed out. The Ediacaran Cambrian transition teaches us that we do not yet know how to read the diary properly, that we are apprentices in the art of understanding deep time. In that humility there is both frustration and beauty. Another meaning is suspicion. When stories have gaps, humans fill them with imagination. We cannot help it. It is in our nature. Where scientists see missing fossils, conspiracists see erased evidence. Where scientists see unexplained shifts, conspiracists see cosmic intervention. The Ediacaran Cambrian divide is fertile ground for such thoughts. Was this a natural leap or a cosmic edit? Were we allowed to see only the before and after, while the middle was deliberately concealed? Is Earth a stage, and have we been kept from seeing the backstage work that prepared the performance? The thought is unsettling, but also thrilling. It places us in a story much larger than ourselves, a story where humanity is not the sole keeper of knowledge, but a character fumbling in the dark, suspecting there is a hidden script. It is the kind of idea that makes the skin prickle, not because it is proven, but because it is possible. The conspiratorial mind goes further still. Perhaps we are not simply puzzled by the gap. We are meant to be puzzled. Perhaps the universe thrives on mystery, thrives on leaving questions unanswered, thrives on keeping us curious. Maybe the missing transitions were erased, not because they never existed, but because the game is more interesting when the players are left guessing. Maybe the universe has a sense of humor, dangling riddles in front of us, like shiny lures. You think you know the story, it asks. Think again. And Earth in this narrative becomes a trickster too. She shows us the Ediacaran impressions, soft and strange, then suddenly dazzles us with Cambrian armor and eyes, as if pulling a magic trick. "Surprise?" she whispers through stone. "Bet you didn't see that coming," and indeed, we did not. The fossils are her stage props, carefully placed, carefully arranged, telling us only as much as she chooses. Are we the audience of her play, forever kept from peeking behind the curtain? Philosophically, the gap raises another possibility. Maybe life itself is not meant to be understood as a smooth path. Maybe it advances in jumps, in sparks, in sudden leaps, because that is the nature of complexity. Perhaps we are wrong to expect gradualness, wrong to expect continuity. Perhaps revolution is as natural as evolution. And yet, even if true that explanation still feels too neat, too unsatisfying, the absence of connections still gnaws, the suddenness still feels stale. So meaning once again drifts toward the conspiratorial. What if the meaning of the gap is that life is not ours alone, that our origins are shared with forces we cannot see, cannot name, perhaps cannot even imagine? What if the Cambrian explosion was not just biology's triumph, but a cosmic announcement? The experiment continues. What if we are participants in a drama whose directors remain hidden, watching from beyond the stage lights? This thought makes the gap less of a scientific puzzle and more of a philosophical mirror. It reflects our yearning for narrative, our suspicion that life is too grand to be accidental, our inability to sit comfortably with silence. The Ediacaran and Cambrian transition is not just about fossils, it is about us, about our need to explain, to connect, to make sense. And when sense fails, imagination rushes in, wearing the costume of conspiracy. Humor helps us cope with the enormity of it. We laugh at the idea of alien editors erasing transitional fossils with cosmic erasers, of bureaucrats locking slabs of stone in secret vaults, of Earth as a cosmic aquarium with dials adjusted by unseen hands. The laughter does not mean we believe, but it also does not mean we don't. Humor is our way of holding mystery without being crushed by it, of acknowledging absurdity while keeping the door to possibility slightly ajar. At its deepest, the meaning of the gap is existential. If the story of life includes hidden edits, sudden leaps, and erased chapters, then what does that say about us, the descendants of those Cambrian creatures? Are we products of Earth's slow unfolding, or are we the outcomes of interventions, experiments, adjustments from beyond? If our origins are uncertain, then so too is our identity. Are we children of chance, or children of design? Are we the culmination of Earth's own creativity, or the result of cosmic tinkering? Perhaps we will never know. Perhaps the meaning lies not in answers, but in the very act of wondering. The Ediacaran and Cambrian gap forces us to ask questions we would otherwise avoid. What is life? Where does it come from? Why does it unfold the way it does? And most unsettling of all, are we being told the whole story, or only the parts we are allowed to know? That suspicion that we are being kept in the dark is the most conspiratorial meaning of all. Maybe the universe is hiding its playbook. Maybe governments and scientists are complicit, knowingly or not, in guarding the silence. Maybe the Earth herself conspires, tucking away her missing fossils, letting us argue and speculate while she keeps the truth deep in her stone vaults. We are like children handed only fragments of a storybook, left to imagine the missing pages. Perhaps that is by design. Perhaps that is the game. And so the gap becomes less about what happened and more about what it means to live with mystery. It reminds us that knowledge is never complete, that certainty is an illusion, that even in the age of science and satellites, the Earth still keeps secrets older than the stars we met. It reminds us that curiosity is our greatest inheritance, that wonder is as much a survival trait as teeth or claws. It reminds us that sometimes the unanswered question is more powerful than the answer itself. The Ediacaran and Cambrian transition is a cosmic riddle, whispered in stone. It is an invitation to humility, to imagination, to conspiracy, to laughter. It is Earth reminding us that her story is deeper than we can know, and perhaps stranger than we can believe. It is the universe asking us to wonder whether we are seeing the full picture or only what we are meant to see. And in that wondering lies the meaning. not in certainty but in curiosity, not in closure but in the endless opening of new questions. Perhaps we are being cheated, kept from the truth, or perhaps the truth is that mystery itself is the point, for without mystery the universe would be flat, lifeless, dull. With mystery it is alive, playful, infinite. So when we look at the gap, at the vanished Ediacaran forms and the sudden Cambrian bloom, we can laugh, we can argue, we can conspire, but most of all we can marvel. In that mystery, in that silence, in that unanswered question, we glimpse not just the history of life, but the poetry of the cosmos. And so we arrive at the edge of the story, the strange, silent gap between the Ediacaran dreamscape and the Cambrian spectacle, a gap filled with creatures that vanished, with transitions that never appear, with mysteries that linger like shadows on the ocean floor. Scientists puzzle, conspiracists speculate, and we, drifting here in the quiet of night, can only marvel. Was it cosmic intervention? Seeds carried by comets? An experiment erased or a secret hidden? Perhaps it was all natural, or perhaps the truth is stranger than we dare to imagine. The fossils whisper, but do not shout. The rocks record, but do not explain, and the earth herself seems to smile, guarding her secret, as carefully as a storyteller who loves to leave her listeners guessing. That is the beauty of it. The mystery endures. A reminder that even with all our science, all our satellites, all our restless searching, there are chapters of life's story still beyond us. And perhaps that is how it should be. Mystery keeps us curious. Mystery keeps us awake, even as it lulls us into dreams. So tonight, let your thoughts wander. Drift into sleep with oceans shimmering in starlight, with questions too large to answer, with conspiracies playful and profound. Maybe the gap is cosmic. Maybe it is concealment. Maybe it is something else entirely. Whatever it is, it remains an invitation to wonder.
What do you think?
Share your thoughts, add your theory, and let the mystery ripple outward. And as you close your eyes, may your dreams carry you into those ancient seas where life's first great drama unfolded, and where secrets still wait in the dark. Good night and sleep well, in the embrace of Earth's deepest riddles.